Oh my gosh, just look at the dislikes on this thing. Recently, I was reminded that the Little Mermaid 2023 live action was a thing since I was watching a few Disney movies. So I watched it and it was nice. I thought it was pretty well made in some aspects, but that's a separate story. I ended up looking more into the Not My Ariel war. On one side are people against Halle Bailey as Ariel, and on the other side are those who like her as Ariel. So yeah, my opinion is that it's more of a go wrong point for the movie. Although I think I can understand the side supporting Bailey's Ariel. Just hear me out while I'm talking about the topic. I didn't mind much this time around that she was black, honestly. I was just like, oh, high rating, let's check it out. Didn't really matter to me what she looked like. I could still enjoy the movie. Also, personally thought her hair version looked cool, but my feelings aside, because they didn't influence my stance much or at all, I think it was a bad idea after reasoning it out for myself and hearing opinions from both sides about her race swapping. And by bad idea, I don't mean that after they cast Bailey, who they considered to be the best for the role during auditions, they should go for a less talented person just because she's white. That would be heartbreaking for Bailey and be seen as unfair. Or can send the message, your talent won't be enough if you're black, you only lost the role due to your skin color. Kinda like, I was going to promote you, but too bad, you're black. I'll promote your white, less deserving colleague. Like, that kind of situation has more implications. By bad idea, I mean I think they shouldn't have auditioned every ethnicity in the first place for Ariel's part. They could have just limited it to white women for this character, but sure, other ethnicities can take other cool roles in the movie or some other movie, depending on how the original character looks. Kinda similar to if they're doing a Mulan live action, they shouldn't audition white people or something for the role of Mulan. Or they're looking for a female actress for a female character, so they should limit it to females, not having males too. Or they're looking for someone to play a character who's a kid, so they wouldn't audition adults. There are limits to things. So to start off showing how I looked at this issue, I actually heard about this movie to be released years ago and had an automatic negative reaction to Ariel's reinterpretation. At that time, I wasn't interested in watching it. Partly, it just gave me Disney is going too woke vibes, but also it was because she was not the Ariel I was used to from the cartoon, though I was never really attached to this mer princess. Anyway, she looks different. And it's not because I'm so used to seeing white princesses in movies, and I was shocked that a black woman is in one, and a black woman can't be a strong princess or a pretty mermaid or a protagonist. It's not about that. The problem wasn't about race for me, because I've heard that one like every time I looked at the first page on Google articles that support Bailey's casting. The idea that those who are against her casting are somehow racist, though they may have meant a very specific group out of the Not My Ariel group. Like, not everyone. Let's look at some non-white female Disney protagonists. Tiana, a black princess. I sense no issue with her race. Mulan, I sense no issue with her race. Pocahontas, again, I sense no issue. Moana, same. Encanto, ditto. When I saw these characters, I don't remember feeling discomfort, but I felt discomfort with Bailey's Ariel. What can we agree on? Non-white people should be represented, can be great characters, can have a good influence on young children looking to role models. The aspect we disagree on is if Ariel specifically should be black. Let's bring something from psychology into the discussion to hopefully understand things a bit better. Let's look at schema theory. What are schemas? They're mental frameworks in our minds for categorizing and organizing information and memory. Also, notice the word mind. They aren't physical things in our physical brains. They're part of our cognitive activities, the process of learning and understanding. Here's a metaphor to illustrate it better, in a simpler way, from Travis Dixon, link in the description. It's also kind of like how I understood schema before, so I think it's a nice metaphor, since we, two independent people, both conceived of it like this. Anyway, he says, if you think of your mind like a computer, a schema is a folder, and individual bits of knowledge and memories are the files. Here are some examples. So you have your person schemas. In it, you might find information about appearance, behavior, personality, and preferences. In your social schemas, you might think about points like be respectful, pay for movie tickets, don't eat garlic. In your self schemas, you might be thinking, oh, I'll be a future doctor, I'm smart, I hate broccoli, I'm funny. In your event schemas, you might have bits of information about professionalism, your portfolio, your business suit, or your handshake. Your dentist schema may include items such as a waiting room, dread, a dentist chair, the sound of the drill, the smell of the antiseptic mouthwash, and so on. Here's my example. If I say the word dog, your dog schema would be activated and you'll get automatic thoughts or images associated with the word. You probably won't think of this first thing, unless you haven't lived for a while or you're shut away from the world or something. Although bird may also be in your dog schema or folder if you have a memory where bird and dog are closely associated, like, I don't know, if your dog often likes scaring away birds. Schemas make it easier to handle all this information in a complex world. I quote, "It's as if your memory is a huge filing cabinet and each file in the cabinet is a schema. If you open the schema labeled going to the cinema, it would contain all your knowledge about trips to the cinema. For example, buying a ticket, sitting in the dark, seeing a film, other people around, eating popcorn. If you visited a cinema that you have never been to before, you wouldn't have to start from the beginning and trying to work out what to do. You would simply activate your going to the cinema schema to guide your actions. In this way, schemas help us deal more efficiently with the world around us, so when we encounter a new situation, we can apply our knowledge of similar past situations to help us act appropriately." It's also worth noting here that
everyone's experience is different though, so everyone has different schema, because our schema is the collection of our experiences.
As in what we can learn and sense, our memories, though also a lot of the knowledge that we hold in our schemas will be shared with other people who've had similar experiences to ourselves. If you want to learn more about schema, I have links in the video description. It's pretty cool. Back to the Little Mermaid, and some of you may know what I'm getting at here. Ariel, for almost 34 years, has been associated with specific colors. Not only that, she has appeared in picture books, in merchandise, in Disneyland. For some people, this specific appearance has a strong imprint in their memories. So when something comes along that doesn't match their The Little Mermaid, or Ariel, or Disney schema, or folder, we shouldn't be surprised at their bewildered or disapproving reaction. Hey viewer, this is Ariel. No, it's not, and stop saying that it is. There's a mismatch. And some people can definitely associate her with emotions, which makes it a bigger deal when the live action wipes her away. Though I think the good thing about the live action Ariel is that she acts and sounds like the cartoon one in my opinion. I was like, whoa, very nice. She gets her expressions on point. She's good. So at least it isn't a complete mismatch.
Please. Flounder.
Great. Now let's get out of here.
The smallest trident I've ever seen.
Sorry, Scuttle, gotta go.
Yeah.
I don't see how a world that makes such wonderful things could be so bad.
I mean, aside from Ariel, when I watched the live action, I was actually feeling impressed because live action Ursula looked, acted, and sounded like the cartoon Ursula.
And it's a talent that I always have possessed. Pathetic. Unfortunate souls.
Meanwhile, when I saw live action Eric, I did also have the reaction, "Aw, why doesn't he have black hair?" Sad face. But I'm kinda picky. Of course, in my live action adaptation schema, I also knew that people can have creative freedom and make some movie that shares a few similarities to the original, but it has its own whole new plot and new character design. For example, Alice in Wonderland. Though cool, they still kept her iconic blue dress to have some reference to the cartoon. In this case, they kind of disconnected it from the original schema, and another own thing is formed. It's even better that there's a reason for the changes, because this new Alice in Wonderland is about when she grows up.
When we assimilate new experiences, we interpret them in terms of our existing schemas. So if a toddler has never seen a deer but has a schema for horse, she may call the first deer she sees a horsey. She wants to fit it within her understanding. But with more interactions in the world, our minds expand to accommodate or adjust to new experiences. So soon enough, that kid realizes that deer aren't just horses, and she adjusts her schema.
What about Spider-Man Homecoming? At first, I was disappointed when I heard that she's Mary Jane, and she didn't look like Mary Jane at all. Though, after watching the movie, I was fine with Zendaya as MJ. She's not Mary Jane, she's Michelle Jones, and they have different personalities. The plot is also different from the Sam Raimi trilogy, which I'm comparing to because unfortunately I didn't read the comics. So they're quite dissimilar and disconnected. But the Little Mermaid movie didn't really do that. They made an effort to make many of the scenes really similar to the original cartoon. I mean, I kind of like that because I was like, whoa, nice detailed observation and replication. But I was also kind of annoyed when I thought about the changes they made to characters' appearances. Because what they end up doing by making scenes so similar is cueing the viewer to make constant comparisons between the live action and the cartoon. And then the viewer is constantly reminded about how different some characters look compared to the cartoon, thus bringing disappointment. But even before watching the movie though, just by looking at how other characters may look similar to the cartoon ones, while Ariel looks different, I think people would still be comparing and then disappointed by a mismatch. So I think the more similarities, the less someone can think, oh, these are two quite separate creative works, but instead they can think, one work is a bad copy of the other. I don't think you can have both things, having basically the splitting image of the cartoon classic scenes, while also having different looking protagonists. The whole thing reminded me of live action adaptations of anime as well. In the anime community, I often hear that live actions are a bad thing. It's partially how characters look for sure. For the ones I see, I'm like, oh no, why doesn't the character look right? Like, why do they all have normal hair while anime characters have these like rainbow ice cream scoops on their heads? Or, why does this wig look so fake? Hello. Oh, is that you, Light? Oh my gosh, why is his hair so whitish and curly? It looks like freaking meat floss. He screams like a little girl. The original guy was freaking cold and didn't start off that neurotic. What is this abomination? OMG, this guy looks nothing like L. Why is he black and wearing black? And even worse, that's giving an impression that L is so unconfident in his intellect that he has to cover his face to stay safe or something. I'm so done. They butchered the main guy and they butchered my boy. Not interested in watching. Although yeah, this was basically my reaction when I saw the trailer years ago. And there were mostly similarities to the original anime in the trailer, aside from how some characters looked. The Death Note looks the same, Ryuk looks similar, the plot seems the same, Light's goal is the same. Although we do have different interpretations about things the more information we have, because our schemas can be built upon and adjusted.
We're constantly striving for cognitive equilibrium or harmony between our thought processes and our environments, which are always giving us new things to think about and adjust to.
Like, I might think that the live action is fine after I watch it, if and only if they make their separate good work. Even if it's dissimilar and disconnected enough from the original, and don't have too many schema connections to ruin, it can seem unnecessary to make certain changes. Like, it may not add to the original, or be a kind of cool spin on it or anything. The Death Note live action just seems much worse from what I know about it. Like, if we go back to the Alice in Wonderland live action, while it's mostly different from the cartoon, it's still connected somehow to it, right? So it's still going to be compared to the cartoon on some level. Just not as much as The Little Mermaid, I think. So I think if there's a live action adaptation that's pretty disconnected from the original, but it's way worse than the original, in some way it's still going to disgrace the original since they're still compared on some level. Oh look, the same dislikes curse, like for the Little Mermaid live action trailer. I also remember how, as kids, my sister and I watched the Dragon Ball whitewashed live action, and we both liked it. But here's the thing, we didn't watch the original Dragon Ball anime. As little munchkins, the first time we heard of Dragon Ball and remembered it was this movie. There was no previous schema. There was nothing to ruin. So that's why I thought, if the creators of the Little Mermaid live action really want a black character who can inspire some people, then why don't they make a new unique work with original characters? New page. Nothing to connect to, no classic to potentially ruin. Remember when I listed some female Disney protagonists earlier? Let's look at them in light of schema theory. Tiana. I didn't remember some set description of the princess from the Frog Princess's story. In fact, I either forgot most of it or only vaguely knew the story, so my Frog Prince schema was mostly empty, and Tiana could fill it just fine without any problems. Also, I re-listened to the Frog Prince story to check, but even when I vaguely knew the story, the Princess and the Frog story was clearly changed from the original, so yeah, they're quite disconnected and it's more fun. Mulan. I didn't know the original either, so I had no Mulan schema before the movie. But if someone did know it, then I don't think they'd have an issue with her appearance, since Mulan is a fictional folk heroine of Chinese history. And she looks Chinese, alright. Pocahontas? What I knew about her as a kid was that she was a historical Native American, and the character design was in alignment with that, so no problem again. Moana and Encanto. Original stories, so no schema. They're perfectly fine. Now let's see what some people who are against the race swapping to a large extent, or to some extent, have to say about it. From Cora. By the way, I edited it to show the relevant parts instead of just keeping all these repetitive things or separate weird arguments. If you want to see the full post, the link is in the video description, along with my other references or sources. Anyway, I shared my thoughts first though because I built my main stance before I even read about what other people had to say about Bailey's Ariel. So showing their thoughts now will reveal that we had overall the same ideas, and it's a lot about schema, not racism. I also just want to be a little more accurate in representing the side that's against the race swapping compared to if I didn't show their opinions at all. Some people also made another point that I didn't think of, which is that having a black woman play Ariel seems kind of lazy coming from Disney, like suboptimal for the black community, which I think makes sense. This one's from Ghostface. Imagine they made a Mario movie and made his outfit purple and yellow instead of red and blue. Yes, it doesn't impact the story or plot, but when a character has had such an iconic appearance for over 30 years, changing it is going to upset some people. This is from Ariel, I hope I pronounced that right. For accurate and meaningful representation, they should create new characters instead of changing a character that has been like this for 30 years to something we are not familiar with. Maybe with minor characters, but not the main characters that spend so much time on the screen. The Grinch has been portrayed as green for years, and if someone just made him pink, of course I would not like if the character I loved and grew up with turned into a completely new character, appearance-wise. I think if they want representation, they should make new characters instead of changing pre-existing characters without thinking of the consequences. And this is from Jennifer Smith. Sonic, like Ariel, is getting his own live-action movie. When the first images of Sonic for his movie were released, below on the left, fans were completely enraged because the movie interpretation did not match the already established image for Sonic from the game. Paramount, unlike Disney, actually listened to the fans and postponed the release of their Sonic movie to go back and redo all of it so that the live-action Sonic now looks like the video game version the fans expected, redone image on the right. So I know that at least some live-action Sonic backlash can be about him not looking like the game version. Other people can just be against his ugly appearance and human teeth. Here's from 𝘀liche𝗂𝗂𝗿𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀. Wanting diversity, representation, and inclusion should mean to create a new, an original, and a unique character. Build it up and make the character an icon whom people can identify with. It does not mean changing an established icon and creating rifts and confusion in the process. Now, I'm sure Halle is a beautiful girl with a lovely voice, but she just isn't Ariel. No offense, hate, or discrimination meant, and it's not racism either. We simply want what is closest and faithful to one of our most beloved classic Disney movies of all time. She can instead play another original and unique princess or mermaid character, but not Ariel. Alice Getz says that she looks nothing like Ariel. Look, I don't have issues with black mermaids, white ones, Hispanic, or even Asian ones. I've seen beautiful mermaids in artwork that have been all ethnic groups. I just have a problem with that mermaid being played by a black actress. Namishti Gali says it's unfaithful. It's unfaithful because it's supposed to be a shot-for-shot remake of the original, or at least very close to it. And I'll say this, whitewashing is just as bad, especially with the new Netflix adaptations of anime. The right thing to do is to try to get people who look like the original characters. Or make an original storyline and cast a character of any race you want. Lucas Viller says, you want to include blacks? I've got a great idea. Go somewhere where people are what the US would consider black, learn about their culture, their stories, their tales, and make a great new movie that makes coherent sense with blacks, and isn't just a woke remake. They've done it with movies like Coco or Moana. Or just create a story yourself from scratch, where characters are black. By pushing it on already existing characters without any additional value, you just make me feel stupid for watching it and giving you a penny. Seeing black dwarves and elves, the only coherent black dwarves here are the stars, black mermaids and black Hermiones is not a problem of we want all white. I would have the same problem if they started making Wakanda white. It's a problem of incoherent cheapness whose only value is a political piece. They are turning everything into empty political moves. It is hysterical. The definition of political hysteria. Oh, this is 𝘀liche𝘂𝗿𝗀𝗀𝗀 again. I just realized. I don't like Halle Bailey as Ariel. Not because she's a bad actress or something, but because Disney's move just feels like pandering rather than a sincere attempt at diversification. Ariel, at least half of her, was meant to look a certain way. Red hair, blue eyes, light skin. And the faithful thing to do is to just get a human who looks the same. It would be terrible if they casted a blonde-haired woman, or an older woman, or a woman with short hair. No one would accept that. Edit. Yes, as some of you may have pointed out, the Disney version changed her look to a redhead from Anderson's blonde character, but that version was vastly different in story and character from the Disney version. In fact, they don't even share the same name. If Disney chooses to change the story and the main character, they could really make a good original movie with Bailey. If they copy and paste the old one, it'll be disappointing just like most Disney live-action remakes. Alex Cooper says, I think both sides have a point. Adjust myself on this fence I'm sitting on. So I added that he's on the fence, just so he's not misrepresented. But I edited this part here to show his stance about disagreeing with the casting. Okay, so others might just want Disney to stay loyal to the original, which makes sense to an extent. Ariel's race could be swapped with a little difference, but should it? I'm sure there really are some people who have grown up with and grown attached to the character in the original Little Mermaid. Not simply because she's white, but because she is the original. I'm sure plenty of white people who loved Mulan as a child would like to see an Asian actress in the live-action version, which they're doing, and would be disappointed if a white woman played her. I'd be pissed if the new remake of Blade had a white actor. I haven't spoken to black people about it. I haven't spoken to anyone about it, funnily enough. But it's also possible that some may see it as tokenism and a feeble attempt to cater to minorities without having to create new stories and new characters. Fern P says, no disrespect towards anyone when I'm going to say this, but I know my words will be twisted and bent to say that I am some sort of Disney racist. Anyway, I am South African, I am mixed, still forced to be classified as a colored, and I know all about racism, learned about it since I was born. If I were an African American, I would feel ashamed that Disney had to erase Ariel's skin color just to make me feel like I belong somewhere, instead of creating something new for me. I honestly would not watch this movie because I find it disrespectful to the original writer and people in general. Matthew Murray says, my feelings about this are a bit complex. I know nothing about Bailey's other work, so I have no idea if she possesses the necessary singing and acting chops to play Ariel, as defined by the original movie, and to a vastly lesser extent, the 2008 Broadway musical adaptation. If she does, that's great, and I don't really have a problem with her giving it a chance. Far better, in my book, is for Disney to use its functionally infinite resources to create new avenues of opportunity for performers of all skin colors and backgrounds. In other words, if Bailey is really so good, let her headline a new live-action Disney movie about a black character. Let her define the terms of the part, let her prove what she can do, and let people assess the material and her interpretation of it on their own terms. That's a lot more fair to her, and to all the people who see any opportunity like this as a major step forward. And in the end, isn't it better than forwarding the idea that there cannot be black roles that weren't white first? This, though, relates to the big problem I have with all of this. Disney should not waste its time and resources making live-action versions of animated films that are already near perfect. They are not going to add anything to the canon of movies. They're not going to supplant the original. They're only going to be compared against them, and chances are not favorably. This is the same problem with most of Disney's stage adaptations of the movies, too. Why not just figure out what works in the live-action format based on the performers you have or want to showcase, and then create something new? It may be harder, but it's better all the way around, and it offers a bounty of new opportunities for actors, composers, directors, designers, and every other area that are limited when the entire goal is to merely copy what came before. Also, let's look at some parts from this video right here, link in the description. As you'll see, they can't help but to compare the movie to the original cartoon or to the information in their schemas. The movie just looks so different from the original animated series. I watched the trailer and it looked totally different. For example, the original was very bright, whereas the trailer was all about the deep sea, and the overall tone felt very dark and gloomy. Because it felt very different from the original, I didn't watch it. I've seen it. Then how would you rate the movie on a scale of 1 to 10? I did see similarities between this movie and the original animated film. I'd say 7 to 8. I read the fairy tale and also watched the animated series. That's why I had high expectations for this live-action adaptation. While I can understand the intent behind the casting choice, I feel like they just went too far. Everything from the hairstyle to the hair color, it deviated too much from the original. If you take all the characters in Aladdin, they all looked like the original. But in this case, Ariel was missing her essential characteristics. When I was going through the trailer and other YouTube videos, I couldn't feel that Disney vibe from the color palette. It doesn't matter whether it's a black, white, or Asian actress. It's just that she doesn't fit the image that I have in my head when it comes to Ariel. When it comes to live-action adaptations by Disney, I don't think people want to watch because they don't know the storyline. They want to see their childhood memories and imaginations from books and pictures come to life. It's just that this movie doesn't meet those expectations and imaginations. I just think the way they are going about this is not right. Political correctness is supposed to help break racial stereotypes, right? But by not casting the right actress, they are only making people focus on the race element, and the hatred towards that race even more. So she was talking about a potential bad outcome, which may be avoided by creating original stories and characters, which others have mentioned earlier. Anyway, of course, not all of these comments are about Ariel's appearance, but there it demonstrates a lack of disconnect between the live action and the cartoon classic in people's schemas. Also, I personally thought Flounder's appearance was acceptable, because it kind of makes sense, more later. But there were literally people fish frying Flounder. Heh. He's a little fishy. Similar to the Ariel thing, they must be discriminatory or antagonistic against animals. Speciesism. So I'd say, about Not My Ariel people, maybe some are actually racist or said racist things. I'm not sure what everyone said about the character or the actress, and I think it's unfortunate and terrible if they did target the actress. But for others holding that position, there's no real reason to think that they're racist. In what I described and then read from other people, I don't see any sign of racism. Like, at this point, if you're still insistent that it's racism, check your definitions and check more people's reactions for being against it. And I know that people can generalize often in general. So I'm not really surprised if I hear someone just label the notmyariel hashtag as racist. But I still dislike such flawed generalizations. They're so inaccurate. Like, imagine calling a whole family annoying when it's just the uncle who is. Also, if you're still against the notmyariel crowd, try to understand their view if it seems to be about Schema. Again, since everyone had different experiences in Schema, you could consider if you attached much meaning to the cartoon Ariel, like others might have. Did a lack of attachment influence why you don't think it's a big deal if a black actress replaced her? And this could be a good food for thought as well, like, in general, how does your schema of things influence the way you interpret them? So considering what we've looked at, let me address or comment on some points made by people from the side supporting her casting, or who seem to be against the Not My Ariel stance. Ariel's race is inconsequential, because it does not have any influence on her story.
The skin color of Ariel serves absolutely nothing to the plot of The Little Mermaid.
Okay, so I don't know why these people are bringing up plot, as if Not My Ariel people are complaining about the plot and not just the character. It could kind of be a red herring, unless they're talking specifically about people who might say something like, I'm not interested in watching the movie because that's not my Ariel. In that case, I agree. If you're interested in watching the movie or curious about it, don't let Ariel's appearance stop you. Her appearance isn't going to affect everything else. But of course, some people just aren't interested in watching it because it isn't their genre or whatever, which is fine. Anyway, I wanted to talk about a point. Is skin tone just a minor change to a character? I mean, when I saw Ursula, I noticed, after some time, that she had a jacket and it had a cool villainy design. This is an adjustment to her outfit that I consider to be minor. Why? Well, I'm generally oblivious, but I did note that it took me a while to even realize her outfit difference. With Ariel, it was instant, and I think it's also because skin can take up a lot of the appearance of the character, a lot of an audience's view of them. It's a pretty obvious change. I think it makes sense that if you make a change harder for people to detect, the less likely they're going to have a problem with it in their schemas. They might not notice the problem is there. So I think minor changes would be those that either take up a pretty small part of the character, or those that aren't some iconic part of the appearance. Like, imagine they turned Luffy's straw hat into a top hat. To compare the Ariel change to Ursula, I think it would be like if they gave Ursula a fish tail instead of octopus legs. That would take up a lot of her appearance, so it's a bigger deal. But hey, it serves nothing to the plot. On to the next thing, part of an article. Unpacking all of the Little Mermaid backlash by Kate Mannion. It's an argument that many in the non-myariel crowd are using. The notion that Halley's casting is an example of race swapping, and that it's somehow a huge disservice to real mermaids everywhere to change the appearance of the original character. I'm being facetious, but barely. As one Twitter user commented, as a redhead myself, one of just 2 to 3% of a global population, we have a right to demand a real redhead plays a character that was iconic for us. Another agreed, saying that redheads are part of a minority, and therefore want to be represented on screen. Seeing as Halley's Ariel does have red hair, not quite. I think it's pretty brownish if you ask me. I think it's safe to assume that it's not the color of her hair they're upset about. Now, if these mythical sea creatures did exist and were comprised solely of fair-skinned, red-haired beings, then sure, it would be a gross misrepresentation not to portray Ariel as such. Oh, on this point, I think someone from the Not My Ariel crowd could bring up something like, imagine a historical person who was played in a movie by a different race. Like, I saw somewhere, imagine if Martin Luther King was shown as white. I think it makes sense for someone on the opposing side to say, don't use that as a comparison, historical is different from fictional. Although Mannion isn't directly addressing this point, since it's relevant, I also don't think the historical figure argument works strongly, just because it's kinda a different category. Changing a historical character's race can kinda wipe out or even lie about the history, the influence, or be disrespectful to the real person, which is quite different from just the schema of a character. Of course, the similarity, though, is that, like the cartoon Ariel, a historical figure has their schema. They have been there for years, and may have impacted people in some way. Both have their stories, and if you mess with the stories, you end up messing with the people. But aside from the fact that mermaids aren't real, it's not even a valid point. In the original story by Hans Christian Andersen, the Little Mermaid is described as the most beautiful of them all. Her skin was soft and tender as a rose petal, and her eyes were as blue as the deep sea. But like all of the others, she had no feet. Her body ended in a fishtail. While there are references to her whiteness throughout the fairy tale, she's never depicted as a redhead. Disney originally intended the character to be blonde, but the 1984 film Splash already had a blonde mermaid. The only reason they ended up choosing red hair was to distinguish Ariel from Splash actress Daryl Hannah. Given that Hans Christian Andersen lived in Denmark in the 1800s, it makes sense that the character would be white. It would also stand to reason that he imagined her with light blonde hair, so this idea that Ariel should be a ginger to pay homage to the origin story is downright absurd. If we stuck to the source material, The Little Mermaid would have been a decidedly different tale entirely. Now, if people are comparing the live action to the original story by Hans Christian Andersen, then I would agree that it's a wonky argument. The cartoon classic is very different from that story, which I actually went and read, and so is the live action. I noticed that the live action had a quote from the book, but I literally didn't sense any other similarities between it and the book. They made the live action incredibly similar to the cartoon classic. You know, even the number of Ariel's sisters, there are 5 sisters in the Andersen book, so including the Little Mermaid, that's 6. While in the cartoon classic, there are 7 of them. And in the live-action movie, there are also 7 of them. Anyway, just connecting to the schema talk, the live-action and book would be too different overall that I think it matters less if the characters have different appearances in each. So, Mannion seems to represent it as an argument from some non-myariel people, the idea that they're comparing the live-action to the original book. But does anyone even use that argument? Like, why would they do that if they're so different, right? Like she said, it's downright absurd. When non-myariel people may say that they dislike the live-action Ariel's casting because she's not like the original, or like in the origin story, couldn't they probably mean the cartoon classic that was popularized and connected to Disney? You know, the original Disney version? They could have simplified it by just saying the original, but isn't it kind of clear what they mean if they'd compare the live-action redhead to the cartoon redhead? Okay, let's move on. Some people supporting Bailey's Ariel seem to make an emotional appeal that the casting was a good idea since little black girls reacted so well to it. They can feel represented and gain more self-esteem or something.
And there have been a lot of opinions about this casting decision sprinkled around the internet. But I'm gonna be honest with you, none of those opinions matter more to me than these little black girls.
A mermaid? Is that a mermaid, Mom? That is Ariel? That's the real her? Ariel! She's black! That's Ariel, right? Out on the sea, love has won. Run, Ariel! Has won.
We're gonna go see it when it comes out in the theater.
Yes! Yay! I just want to watch it.
Yeah, it's cute and touching. Like, it's good for them if they feel that way. There are positive feelings to come out of the casting. But also, number one, the casting also created negative feelings in many viewers. White redheads can feel unrepresented. People who love the cartoon classic can feel dismissed. Of course, one can argue that their suffering isn't comparable to the suffering of black people from racism or underrepresentation since the past. So, whose feelings have more weight? On the other hand, someone can argue something like, these little girls could just be impressed to see a live-action mermaid princess, not a black one specifically. Or, these little girls might not be so affected by black history since they're new to the world. Or, even black people can be against Bailey's casting. So for black people, who the casting may matter to the most, the positive emotional weight or impact of the casting is limited. I didn't see any counterclaims like these last three, by the way. They're just my possible arguments, and maybe they're bad. So anyway, number two. I think these little girls may also be more chill with Bailey's Ariel, since they may not have much of an Ariel or the Little Mermaid schema. They may welcome it like my sister and I welcomed Whitewatch Dragon Ball. Number three. If this is an argument, I just don't think it works very well, because can't the same or similar result be achieved by a movie with, say, an original live-action black Disney princess or mermaids? Then both sides might be more satisfied. In an interview, Bailey also said things that show a similar idea to where point number three can apply.
Just so grateful that they're able to see themselves and feel love and feel worthy and feel confident in the skin that they're in. And I think if I was little and I got to see a black mermaid, it would change my whole life and my whole perspective on myself, my self-confidence, my self-worth, everything. So I just am overjoyed.
Bailey's wholesome and seems sweet. But again, an original character can have an effect like this. On the idea of underrepresentation, I was thinking how it's possible that someone might say that it's fine if Ariel is black now, since in the history of Disney princesses, most were white. Attitudes were different back then. Like, some people seem way more into inclusivity now. One could say that unfortunately more of the princesses happened to be white back then due to the culture, and this was popularized. But it could have been different. Now it's only fair if one of those princesses could be made black to make up for the underrepresentation, right? But as you may realize, I think the same counter-argument works. Like, we could just accept that the previous Disney princesses were mostly white and leave them alone. Then just make new original princesses who aren't white to give underrepresented people an opportunity to shine or to be seen and heard. Let's go to the next point and to what other articles had to say. It's remarkable. For years, ginger folk have been the subject of constant teasing. But suddenly, there's a big pro-ginger army who want Disney to cast a white red-headed girl in the lead. If there's people who feel that strongly that it goes against the image of a cartoon, as if Disney somehow invented the story itself too, they grew up with, then it really is time to grow up. The trouble is, there is just an entitled undertone that lies beneath it, and it is unfortunately racial. This connects to a point in another article. While Disney has produced a very famous iteration of The Little Mermaid, it isn't the first, only, or universally definitive work. No one owns the concept of mermaids or what they look like. So the idea, especially from the first article, is kind of like, who are not my Ariel people to decide what Ariel should look like or to complain about her appearance? They're making it too much of a big deal, like the world revolves around them. They're so entitled and shellfish that they think they can tell Disney to recast her and have it happen. But I think it's just common that some people participate in some trend or comment on it online. It can be any topic. Is there really an entitled undertone, or are they just sharing their thoughts? Some thoughts sound more extreme for emotional topics, so maybe people seem more pushy, or it seems more like a big deal. Anyway, some people may just share that they think recasting Ariel is more fitting. Other people might share their thoughts that she shouldn't be recast, it's fine the way it is, Bailey's race shouldn't be such a big deal. Shall we say that they seem entitled too, thinking that they should have a black mermaid, or think that they have a right to tell these not my Ariel people what to do or think? Like, if someone writes some comment online about some topic like, he has a great voice, I think he should keep singing. Are they thinking that they have a right to tell this guy what to do, or are they just sharing their opinion to the internet? Or if someone says, I think he should quit, are they thinking that they're the boss of this guy, or again, just sharing their opinion? So are we just going to say that a lot of the internet has an entitled undertone? I mean, I could be misunderstanding the author's point, but I think it's kind of weird and redundant, so please broaden my perspective if you understood it differently. I think I'm pretty much done replying to points, because other main points that I've seen were just like rebuttals to weird not my Ariel arguments that I wouldn't use or care about. Now, I want to make another point. I think that as long as there might be a canonical or in-movie/in-show reason for a difference between an animation and its very similar live-action adaptation, it's fine or more acceptable than some difference without such a reason. For example, when I first saw the One Piece live-action series Luffy, I was like, what? But why does he look like that? He looks different from how I pictured him. So, my perceived difference between an animation and a live-action. Having only watched a few episodes of One Piece, I thought Luffy was Japanese since he was speaking the language and he looks Asian. My bad. I had such little info about him that I made that kind of interpretation in my schema. Then I learned that he'd be Brazilian if he was real. This piece of knowledge can still fit into the schema, the category, if I adjust it a little. It can coherently connect with the other characteristics or traits of Luffy. So I accepted how live-action Luffy looked, and I was perfectly fine with it. Although it would be cooler if he had straight hair, TBH. I also watched the live action and thought that he was pretty great as Luffy. But if Luffy was actually Japanese and they picked a Brazilian actor, then his appearance wouldn't fit into my One Piece or Luffy schema. It's off on a category of its own. It would just be a difference from the show for no reason. So back to the Ariel thing, there was no in-show reason why live-action Ariel would be black. As for Sebastian and Flounder, they definitely look different from the classic, but I also thought it was pretty acceptable, since the live action makes 2D characters 3D and more realistic looking, so they're fitting with the rest of the realistic looking 3D movie. Like, if you took a 2D animation and pulled out the characters into the 3D world, they can look like that. It's still coherent in an in-movie way. Of course, some people may still be against how they look because they don't look like the cartoon ones, but I'm more chill as long as it makes sense. When I saw Vanessa's dress, I was like, why is it super different from the cartoon? Sticks out like a bruised thumb even though it's pretty. Then I was thinking that it can kind of make sense if it acts as a symbolic sign of Ursula, who's associated with purple. Vanessa looks so innocent, but the purple can give a kind of sinister feel. Although I think the old design is already pretty and could just be adjusted to look purplish for symbolic purposes, if any, while still satisfying schemas. But this dress is more acceptable than if they just made it bright green for no apparent reason. Bright green would fit less in the Ursula schema. Since there are no in-show reasons for Ariel to suddenly be black, now you can only find reasons out of the movie, which pulls her out of the movie and schema even more. She's only black because that's how the movie creators wanted to cast. It creates more of a mismatch between Bailey's Ariel and the Little Mermaid schema. More reason for some people to think that she's not their Ariel. Okay, so quick summary. Some people's negative reaction toward live-action Ariel's appearance not matching the cartoon classic is justified, in my opinion. I think that making Ariel black was a bad idea since it ended up disappointing a lot of people, and as for the people it seemed to have benefited, the same kind of benefit can come out of an original movie without schema attachments. Well, I'm finished. See you, everyone. I'm tuning out.